Bob, on a scale of 1 to 10, how incredibly excited are you that we're filming an episode right now?
Again, again. Nothing new, nothing changed, same old shit.
Bob says that he is so incredibly ecstatic and very happy to be here sitting next to me. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Safari Pedal Show. I'm your host, Abby. If this is your first time here, welcome to the Crazy Wild Safari Podcast Zoo Thing bandwagon. It's great to have y'all here. Today is a very exciting day here in Abby's Wild Safari Pedals podcast room world ether thing because Philo Tsoungui is going to be on the show. She is a drummer. She notably plays with the Mars Volta. She's also a producer and an artist. We are going to be diving into the whole concept of finding your rhythm, both musically, as a person in this crazy wild safari pedals of a world, and of course we're also going to get the scoop on advice that she has for up-and-coming producers, engineers, musicians, people with all sorts of audio hats. I am just really looking forward to hearing what she has to say and to diving deeper into these topics. And on top of that, I feel like there's not much more that I can add to this intro, so guys, please give a very warm safari welcome to Philo Tsoungui. Welcome to the show.
What's up? What's up?
Hey, thank you so much for hopping on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Same here. Pleasure for us to have you on the show. I've been super anticipating this one, so I'm really pumped to dive in and learn from you. Before we dive in to the episode, let's start with who you are, what you do, and we'll take it from there.
I'm Philo. I play drums first and foremost, but I also produce and do sound design. And most recently I've been kind of tapping into the sort of performance art world. So I have stuff in museums showing right now, which is pretty fun. So yeah, this year has been a lot of new endeavors. So I'm not just primarily a drummer anymore. It's kind of shifting right now, but I guess just my internet persona is mainly a drummer, I guess.
Since you do so many cool things, what came first in the chain for you, and then how has your artistic persona, you can say, evolved since?
In the very beginning, I started with piano lessons, very nothing special or crazy, but I never really liked that, and then I went on to playing drums, and I had an interest in drums and drumming, but the music school in my town, it was all the teachers were musicians from the local orchestra, so everyone was classically trained. So I was took lessons, but I never really took drum kit lessons. I always had marimba, timpani, orchestra stuff, and that just kind of paved the way for me to study classical percussion, which I did my bachelor's in. And then sometime during that studies, I was kind of over with the classical world per se, and just the surrounding I was in. I just never really felt safe, and I could never really be myself, and it was all very uptight, very old, and I always used to call it a dinosaur sort of surrounding, because it's a lot of people that have just been in positions for decades, and that's why nothing ever changes, because it's always been that way, and they will always make sure it's going to stay that way, So I always kind of felt like an alien. And then at some point I was I want to continue making music, and I want to continue playing drums, but not in that way. So I got into playing jazz, and I started taking lessons in jazz, and then just one thing led to another, and I just went on playing the drum kit, basically, which essentially is a whole different instrument at that point, because also my teachers in classical music were always telling me not to play the drum kit, because they had a very specific view and picture of the rock star life, I guess. So they were always just don't waste your time on that, So I did that anyways, because I'm rebellious. I just started taking lessons, and then I did my master's basically in what they call popular music, which is just me playing practicing like crazy, playing the drums. And then like in the first year into that masters I like got my first call to go on tour with someone here in Germany, and just like kind of one thing led to another. That was like in 2017, 2 years ago, the Mars Volta hit me up to play with them, which is just crazy because like I've been listening to them like growing up and stuff, and like they've always kind of been part of my universe and part of my like musical upbringing and like understanding, I guess. So that was crazy, and it still is. And that's the thing the main thing I do right now in terms of drums. But what it like really like kind of kickstarted for me, like being in that band and like being so close to these people, and like also kind of being like understanding more the process of how this type of music like came to be throughout those decades. Like it really kickstarted this need for me to like be like express myself artistically and creatively, and not just be the side person playing someone else's music, but really like to do my own thing. And I've always kind of been doing that, but I never really took the time to like actually deep dive and like prioritize it too, like to like turn down gigs that I could be playing in order to work on an EP or something. So I started prioritizing that like for like the last 1.5 years, I guess, next to playing with that band. And now just like a lot of things happened, and it's like it's so great because like I feel like what I want to be doing artistically is like sort of in a like EDM, IDM sort of electronic music world, like kind of gnarly, texturized sounds. And then me having studied classical percussion, coming from that world, having like a network still, it like automatically like kind of builds bridges between these different genres I've been working in, basically. And that's like how stuff kind of happens right now. It's like people from the classical world hit me up to do something, to like compose a piece, for example, which is like something like I wrote a piece for like string ensemble, and it's gonna premiere this month. And they hit me up to do that, and I was like, yeah, I would be up to do it, but like under my premises, basically. Like I wanna do this. I wanna have electronics. I wanna have these people playing, you know, like. And yeah, just luckily like a bunch of that stuff happened this year where I could just be like kind of steering the ship. And that's like a super new thing for me, because I've always been just like, you know, the side person. Like, you know, you get the call, you get the Dropbox with the songs, you learn the song, you go on tour. Like, it's been quite interesting.
Yeah. First of all, like, what a journey from like the classical world to doing your own thing. Like, that's really especially inspiring to hear how you've reached a place where you're not only doing the drum thing, you also like found a space to like prioritize your own work. That's like a really big thing to balance. So good on you for that. That's super dope. From classical percussionist to playing with the Mars Volta, like I'd love to hear how perhaps either your classical, you can say upbringing influences the way that you play, and also kind of in developing your sound as a drummer, has it influenced the kits you like, mics, all of those things?
I mean, it's an interesting one, and I think I'm only like kind of wrapping my head around it now-ish, you know? Because like it's been 8 years since I transitioned from like classical to like popular music. And in like the first, I would say 6 years, my main priority was to catch up on everything that I hadn't learned before. And then that's like super simple things like dynamics on the kit, like your internal mix on the kit, and coordination, because like you never have that X thing, you know, as a classical percussionist. Like you always like work in like 2 horizontal lanes, basically. If you haven't learned coordination as a child, you know, and it's not that imprinted in your nervous system, it's like it's super hard to do that when you're past 15, I guess, you know. So I had like a lot of catching up to do on like super basic stuff, which kind of definitely informed how I sound and used to sound. because already had like a very like distinct taste and like a very informed taste, because I came from classical percussion. Like I already knew how a good snare drum sounds and how a good bass drum sounds and how where the frequency ranges are of like cymbals, and so that was like that already kind of worked, and I just kind of felt like it was like all on the mixing desk, and I had to like just kind of dial in the faders and dial in the EQs basically. So that was like in some way the advantage at that point, because I had so much work to do that like it kind of made it easier to already like get to a decent sound, I guess. People ask me that so often, like, what do you think, like what's the biggest like influence from classical music, and like where's that bridge, and I never really understood what it was. Like I always used to say, like, I think my biggest takeaway is that I learned how to practice, and I learned how to practice like properly, and I learned how to prepare myself, and I learned how to be on time, and I learned how to be organized. Because apparently like a lot of people in like pop music, they haven't learned that at all, and that has always been something people have been commenting on, and being like, how you're early, like, 30 minutes before rehearsal starts, I'm there, I'm setting up, because rehearsal starts at 10, like I'm not going to start setting up at 10, and like people were like surprised by that in the beginning, and I was always like so irritated, because that was just so normal for me at that point. So I always thought like this like organizational part and administrative part is like what my big takeaway is. But now I really do think it's something else, and it's like it's kind of living in like this metaphysical realm that I can't really pinpoint, and I don't really have words for, because I think it's like living in the same realm as like when I put on Bach, for example, like some choral or something, and like I'm automatically sucked into something, and I don't know what it is. Like it's just the way that this kind of music works, I guess. And it's exactly that feeling that I have when I play like, I don't know, eighth notes in tempo 60 in pianissimo, like the like lowest you can play, and just like do that for like 20 minutes. It's just like it's giving me this like, it's just this weird flow state of like I'm like a unity with that instrument. And I don't think I would have gotten to that point if I would not have studied classical percussion, because I think that is like 95% of my studies was like repeating one bar, for example, like just repeating one bar over and over and over and over until it's perfect, like that's the premise of studying. That is like, you have to get to that point where stuff is perfect, and then you have to go above that, because like you want stuff to be 150%, so that when you're on stage, you can still get 100% out of you, basically, And I think like having studied then like drum kit and stuff, and like, being surrounded by people who have also like gone the route of, or like only gone the route of like popular music, I think that's like something that's not that common to even allow this state, and it's maybe also just something about our time right now, like, or like the digital age, basically, that like everything is like super short and super quick, and like, you have to, I don't know, it's like information, like you're just like bombarded with information, and you always feel like, okay, I gotta like make moves, start a startup, and like, get into Bitcoin and whatever, like, do all these cool things. But we're just like, basically what stands between us and this feeling that I've been talking about is like exactly that. It's just my phone, for example, because in everyday life, like I would never just like sit there and stare out the window and then like have this feeling that I've been talking about kick in, and then like all of a sudden being like inspired by the tree that's outside, or like the birds or whatever, like this state just does not kick in nowadays, because like we're always like then moving on to the next thing, and like opening the phone, and like, just doing something else. And I think that's like the biggest takeaway for me, I think, is like this I have experienced that, I have experienced being like this unity, this one with music. I'm like kind of chasing that feeling whenever I sit down to make music. And whether it's like me producing or it's me practicing, like I'm really like chasing that feeling. It's like when I started meditation, it's like you don't realize how great meditating is for you until you stop doing it. And then you realize, damn, like those 2 months I've been doing that every day, those were great. Like I felt so great. And now I had done it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And I feel like, I don't know, I just don't feel myself anymore, But then like getting back to that, like then you start chasing that feeling and you're like, you're sitting down, closing your eyes and you're like, okay, now I gotta like chill out. I gotta like get to that feeling again, like, and you're like pressuring yourself. But that's like, it's kind of similar to me, like I'm always like kind of get to that feeling, and it's like, as I'm saying, it's like kind of in this like metaphysical realm and it's like super abstract and I can't really like pinpoint what it is. And I maybe will never be able to pinpoint it and might be able to pinpoint it like 10 years from now if we were ever to speak again. And like I could give you an update on like how far into that thought I've gotten, but it's living somewhere else. Like it's living somewhere where it's like it's not the world of like words and thoughts, I think.
It's so fascinating. Like you're the first musician that I've spoken to that's like consciously spoken about like tapping into that like deeper awareness and like that metaphysical, you can say magical music space, and you articulated it very, very well.
Yeah.
So we can still brush up in 10 years and see where you are with the thought, but that was very, very well said and so interesting. Like I would have never guessed that to be like the biggest, you can say, takeaway from classical.
Yeah, because everything else is like it's just so easy to think about it in like a very conscious way, basically, and analyze it. Especially because it's like in a like academic context, and like in academic context there's always a wrong and always a right, and there's like no in between, and like you have your teachers and they tell you that and then you believe that and then you go on to the next teacher and he believes something completely different and your words upside down and you kind of have to like reinvent yourself, like that's studying music, I guess. But I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine. He's from Cameroon and he studied neurobiology and then he went on to like the art world and now he's like the director of a museum, basically. And I talked to him about that and I was like kind of like resentful against like my teachers that I used to have in classical music and like just the overall way this like these 4 years have been for me as like the only non-male, non-white person in the class, And I just had so much resentment and frustration in me. And I talked to him about it and he was like, he just like said one sentence that was like kind of along the lines of like, you have to accept like, this is a part of you now. Like there's nothing you could physically or mentally do to not have this as your part, like if you like try to do it, it's just not going to do anything good, it's like negative energy, like this is not how you would want to treat that. So from that day on, I don't know, that might have been like 4 years ago or something when we had that conversation, I just like kind of tried to like reframe basically that time for me and that like how it felt and how it still feels, and then I had to like basically go and look for other things than like, oh yeah, my technique is super well, or yeah, like I don't know, I know how to tune a snare drum. It's just like those are just like very replaceable aspects of it. Basically, it's like whatever, if it's not that, then it's this thing. But like I spent 4 years studying that. Like obviously, there's something left, but like what's for me personally and like my like self on earth, it's something else.
Yes, flow of energy, dude. Hell yeah.
Exactly.
To sum up everything we spoke about, I always love to ask our amazing guest to either drop, it doesn't have to be a piece of advice, it can be anything, feel free to freestyle to the amazing studio animal viewers. Is there any additional things you'd like to say to the safari world?
Especially in terms of like safari and like just the whole the whole endeavor and the whole like world that you've been building with like your products and stuff is like just first and foremost, like keep experimenting and just like keep being curious and keep being open. Like try to find ways to like incorporate everything that is kind of around you in the real world into what you're doing. And I'm not just talking like, putting up the plugin and like tweaking and stuff. I'm really also just talking like, for example, like I wonder like how many of the people like playing guitar, for example, who are listening to this have had like an actual experience of like, how does your finger actually feel on the strings? Like, how does it actually feel? Like besides, okay, like you practice a lot and like everything is like open and hurts and stuff, but like just like a very like conscious way of like handling your instrument. Sometimes I'm like, even on stage, like even on stage, I'm like, I have my sticks in my hands and I'm just like, damn, like it's just such an interesting thing, like this is like not a Rick and Morty episode, like interdimensional TV type of thing, like and on this planet they're like hitting stuff with like wooden sticks, and they're calling it music or they're calling it a drums or whatever, like just sometimes I'm on stage and I'm like, damn, like this is so interesting, that I'm like doing this and this is like a whole thing, and there's like whole communities around it and stuff. But I think this level of like awareness can only come if you're like actually like consciously approaching everything you're doing, basically. And it can also like keep you from getting problems with your joints and stuff like that, because you start to listen to your body much earlier than other people would who do not take care of that at all, or are just not conscious of that, of like how does it actually feel? Oh damn, I'm not sitting straight, like, and I'm sitting comfortably, like, so yeah, like just be very like, just try to be aware and open and conscious. If it comes to a day where you're like, damn, like I'm not myself today, I've just been on my phone, don't let that frustrate you too, because the moment you're realizing that, like the moment you realize there's a shift and the moment you realize there's something changed, that's like your proof that you have been living more consciously before, like the days before, because you wouldn't be aware of that, it's like if we wouldn't ever get sick, we would not be aware of how being healthy feels like, keep experimenting, keep messing with safari stuff, like it's the funnest thing on earth. It's like so great.
I love that. Such great advice. I also need to ask you, do you have a favorite Safari plugin currently?
I think the yak delay.
Hey, if you are not conscious, if you don't think you were conscious before yak delay, once you try yak delay, you'll be very conscious once you have all that flying through your headphones or across your monitors. It'll whack you into consciousness.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that thing.
I really appreciate you sharing so much wisdom and awareness, and I think that this episode will definitely unlock lots of minds, so thank you very much.
If this like kickstarts anything in anyone, like even if it's just like one person that like starts to like incorporate something or is like inspired, like that's, even if it's just you stated that something inspired you, so it's already great.
Yes, already one person, but hopefully two people. We'll start with that. And guys, after this episode, I may start some Safari Pedals meditation and mindfulness classes. If this is something that's in high enough demand, we can absolutely supply. It can be done. So let me know in the comments. We can work that out. Ask me where the culprit